and gentlemen, video games are going remake crazy, and a lot of the time, we could probably do without. But there's a lot of hidden gems out there that could really benefit from a little sprucing up. My name is Chris with C-Fresh Gaming, and today we're talking about games that have been swept under the rug and that desperately need that remake. At number 10, we're looking at The Predator, The Concrete Jungle. This game absolutely set the bar pretty damn high. It certainly wasn't the most immaculate looking thing on the market, but as it came out all the way back in 2005, nothing really was. But the level design was very unique for its time. Eurocom was the company that developed the game, and the original plan was having a full open world city. But due to all the restrictions of the PS2 and the proprietary engine that the game was running on, just couldn't make that dream come true. And on top of that, when you're working on a licensed IP that has strict release dates and cutoff times, as we see in a lot of the games here today, they're just not allowed to have the proper amount of time in the oven to solve these issues. So to have something like this come back would be spectacular. Considering the hardware that we're working with today, the amount of weapon variety we had in this game was insane. We had the Predator's polearm, the classic two-prong claws. They gave us a plasma gun that came out of our shoulder pads with that Predator 3-dot aimer, thermal vision, night vision, throwable disc that just sliced people in half. It was pretty ridiculous. And that's not to mention the absolute brutality and gore that went with it. Like, look at this. You're slamming people over guardrails, snapping necks. I don't even know how deep I can go because YouTube's probably not going to like it too much. And the one main element to the game that you needed to participate in is going out to find all the main bad guys throughout the city. And once you knock them out, you got to go bring them to this billboard to get filleted. I mean, you're skinning these people and collecting their skulls to put in your collection. The point is, though, they put a lot of work into this game, and it was just severely hindered by the times of 2005. Coming in at number 9 is Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Blacklist. One of the most well-known games ever made, and it feels like it came from a completely different Ubisoft from the one we know today. You know, this was back when the company was actually willing to take risks and do that sort of thing. And to be honest, I'm not really saying I would trust the modern day Ubisoft to remake the Splinter Cell Blacklist or any of them at that matter, while still retaining all the things that made it special in the first place. But I'd love to see it remade in some fashion at some point. Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell came onto the scene with some relatively innovative gameplay, using light and darkness as a very essential variable to achieve a level of authentic stealth. This rivaled games like Metal Gear Solid 2, and modern stealth games were huge in the early 2000s. And in my opinion, it was a bit unfortunate that we don't get games like this more often. There's definitely some few and far official stealthy games, even looking right at you, Assassin's Creed. It's going more into that combat focus instead of increasing the depth of their stealth gameplay. I mean, this is a world where the little things really mattered, like using a silencer and shooting out the light bulbs to create more room to work with in each level. You're working with different types of gadgets to make life easier out in the field, and you got the freedom to approach levels the way you see fit. Since Blacklist in 2013, this game has been nowhere to be found, and it even introduced a pretty damn good multiplayer suite, which was some of the most fun I had, bringing the mercenaries versus spies and stealth gameplay into the mix of PvP. Yeah, it was broken and pretty poorly maintained, but that's why we're talking about this now, to make it better. Even though Splinter Cell wasn't made to be like an annual Call of Duty style franchise machine looking to pump out a new flavor every year, taking one or a few of the 7 games, especially Blacklist, and giving it a bit of an overhaul or revamp, I think would be a big win for the fans of the franchise today. With that being said, this is not a franchise they are going to want to take lightly. You play as Sam Fisher, and it has a lot of build-up and expectations behind the game. The world they set us in was always extremely immersive, with realistic guns, the missions were very diverse, so honestly you don't even need a total overhaul of the game. It has a very solid foundation to work off of already, and I think a remake could bump up a lot of the tolerable and bad segments and bring them back up to a level that would make Splinter Cell come back into the forefront of current or next-gen games. Number 8. We got The Simpsons Road Rage.
Please kill me. That poor man. I hope someone does kill him.
This game was another blast of fun I think people would enjoy seeing, once again, with a little bit more polish and flash added back to it. Let me know in the comments if you remember this one, and if so, which one? Because there was actually 2 different versions released across 4 consoles, and The Simpsons Road Rage was going to be brand new on the 6th generation of consoles, and the game developers, Radical Entertainment, knew they needed to make a game that took advantage of the next-gen hardware. With that being said, the game was actually pretty bare bones. It had a very light storyline, nothing that was going to blow your socks off. It had a very archaic feel to it, and it became kind of repetitive very quickly. There were a few nice cutscenes in there to fill in the player on why this game exists and why we're doing what we're doing, but they were sprinkled in very thin, with being few and far between main segments of the game. They can do a lot of sprucing up to this game with the remake while keeping it relatively the same, or going the total opposite way with a full-on overhaul. You could expand the scope by making it just an overall bigger game, add a few more voice lines, cause that got real repetitive real quick, bring in a whole bunch more mechanics from character to character, and we're looking good. Touching on the graphics, those were pretty rough, especially just comparing it to like the regular Simpsons game, but a win on their end is that they did a good job with keeping the same voice actors as the original series, and it definitely retains the show's signature humor because of that.
Still ain't tipping yet, I'm Scottish.
Safe and sound.
See you around, dirtbag.
Take me to Grandma's world. I'm horny.
Take me to the Maison Derriere. This coupon for free lap dances expires in 5 minutes. You got it.
Another great part of the game that wouldn't really need to be touched at all is all the landmarks and Easter eggs in like the 6 different maps. For example, you got Evergreen Terrace, which of course is home to the locations such as the Simpsons house, the Quickie Mart, the school, the church, and all these maps were filled with billboards from the shows. So the base foundation is already there. There's a lot that can be done to the game, but there's still a lot that still would hold up very well. But the dream for me would be like rebuilding it from the ground up. I don't mean just like graphics like The Last of Us Part 1, but more of like a full remake to make the game bigger, have a better and deeper storyline, put a few more set pieces in there, just redo the whole shebang. Coming in at number 7, we're looking at Bloodborne. What's up with this thing, people? We got no PS5ers, no next-gen updates, not even a little taste of like 60 FPS mini patches, nothing. Bloodborne is fine as it is. You could technically play it on next-gen hardware, but it still feels like it's kind of lost to the previous console generation. I mean, it's not the biggest contender for a remake on the list, because, well, it's like a solid all-around game as is. I don't even feel like they need to remodel anything in the game, but maybe put a little work into the lighting engine or something. I don't know. I don't even care, really. Just give me an upgrade on the resolution and my 60 FPS patch, and that's all I really give a crap about here. I don't know why Sony just absolutely refuses to do anything with this banger of a game. So many people out there still haven't gotten to experience this thing, and for those of you out there that haven't, you're missing out. But I'm putting my money on it's because it could be some issue with From Software. They actually made the game. Maybe they plan on putting out a full remake on the PS6. Who knows? But on the bright side of things, we can always look at the whole Demon's Souls remake for some hope here, because after they did that, it seems like it's only inevitable that Bloodborne comes next. I know these fans don't really love the Demon's Souls remake. That game is very high fantasy, and Bloodborne is more gothic horror, so there's definitely some differences. But the more on the table that we have when it comes to remakes like this, I think is always going to be better. Bloodborne really set and was the definer of what From Software style is today, and all the games that followed were pretty much the same art style and was clearly inspired by Bloodborne. Even looking at Dark Souls 3, it's way more horror themed than even the game's sequel. From Software could just even do like a Blue Point style remake that's exactly the same game with updated graphics, but who knows if they will. It's the game that everyone wants. PS5 gamers, PC gamers, we all want to see it come back. But it's going to be a touchy one as well, where they can easily screw something up with a new art design if it's given to a team that isn't capable of these uniquely grotesque visuals. It's truly hard for me to believe we're never going to see a remake of it with over 7.4 million copies sold, and who knows how many more we're looking at from today, but it's certainly the diamond in the rough we will all be continuing to wait for. Moving on to number 6, we're looking at The Mandalorian, specifically the original Bounty Hunter. Now this was remastered for the PS5, and with it actually looking pretty damn good. So anyone that played that game, let me know your thoughts. But overall, I think it could still be a solid contender here, with it being just put through a complete overhaul. But let's give some background first, shall we? This game was released in late 2002 for the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube. This third-person action-adventure game had us playing as the one and only Jango Fett, bringing to the table all of his iconic weapons weapons, gadgets, and of course, that classic Mandalorian armor. Now, the remaster was re-released on August 21st, 2024 by Lucasfilm Games for the latest generation consoles and PC. And good news, everyone! This new version of the Bounty Hunter is actually natively able to run at 60 FPS with resolutions up to 4K. And you get some other additional updates being added in, like dynamic lighting and shadows, motion blur, and some more goodies being thrown in there. Now, this does leave it as a notable upgrade for sure, but even with these upgrades, it leaves a lot to be desired. For example, like any of the cutscenes where you're close up, you're gonna want to wish you stepped back a bit. You're definitely gonna be reminded that this is still a 22-year-old game, and this is why we need something just like this, like keep the bones of the game, just a fresh take or a complete overhaul of the gameplay, controls, and graphics. Like the level design and missions were very repetitive and extremely frustrating. The NPCs are just awkward and frankly just as dumb as they come. It was a very linear design for most of these levels, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but there's like very little to no variety at all when it comes to flanking or how you want to play the game. It's pretty cut and dry in that aspect. Yeah, you got some choices with this level here, specifically allowing you to like choose to either escort the contact to their hideout at gunpoint or just blast them and find it yourself. I don't know, little bits like that help, but again, it's just more of a reason why this game is on the list to be remade. The best parts of this game and something that needs to be brought over is Django's arsenal of trademark weapons and gadgets. We had the laser cutter, we had the hook tie, a dart that just knocked people out, and of course his signature dual-wield pistols. This game also had one of the best depictions of Coruscant in any Star Wars game. It covers so many iconic areas from the nightlight sector to the industrial sector and way more, all true to what we've seen in the movies. All that being said, I think with how good this base game is and how popular the new Mandalorian series was on Disney Plus, I bet there's a lot of people out there looking for a fresh, updated, and completely overhauled version of the Mandalorian video game. And by the way, do me a big favor and consider hitting that like button for me. It helps me out so big and lets me know you're enjoying the video. Thank you so much, everybody. At number 5, we have Fallout 1 and 2, and with the TV show essentially acting as a sequel to the original 2-part Fallout games, there's absolutely no better time to bring out the classics. But I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not the biggest fan of the new Fallout games. I think they kind of suck, but feel free to yell at me in the comments down below on why I'm wrong. But Fallout 1 and 2 are some of the best RPGs of all time, but going back and playing them, that's pretty rough. They're very archaic in terms of controls and UI design, and the graphics, well, it's seen better days. I would love to see a complete overhaul to the games with the new Unreal Engine 5 look, some new gunplay mechanics. I'm kind of looking at something like the new Stalker 2 visuals if I'm living in a dream world and can get whatever I want. But there's two ways that they can go about this remake. Either go full Bethesda and remake them as 3D open world games, which I know would be insane and require like everything being made from the ground up. That would be a lot of freaking work. Or you can go the Diablo 2 Resurrected direction with converting everything to 3D, but keep the isometric view while keeping it as close to the original as possible. Just make it so everything looks 10 times better. Shit, even do what that game did and make it so you can like switch between the new graphics and the old with the push of a button. I think that would be pretty badass. Make it so we have some solid controls with a controller, make some optimal improvements with some combat and balance, maybe throw in a few Easter eggs, boom, we're good to go. I think I'd prefer that option versus going all out full 3D. And this goes back to what I said about how I feel about the post Fallout 3 games. I'd just be too scared that they would like rough them up in a way that could ruin the name or what was previously achieved. I don't know, and you pretty much need to make like 2 brand new games, and I certainly can't see Bethesda or really anyone else looking to do that. Number 4, Sly Cooper. Now this is one of my favorite games. Let me know down in the comments who played this or remembers this one, because I would love to see any of the Sly Coopers remastered or even continued in general. The first Sly Cooper game came out for the PlayStation 2 in 2002, and it had a banging storyline with fantastic cutscenes and cinematics to go right alongside it, especially for its time. And kind of like I said for the Splinter Cell games, we don't really have too many of these stealthy, approachy games. And being a master thief that descended from a line of vigilantes as you go after a book, your family heirloom, and collect pages that reward you with your past ancestors' techniques. I mean, come on, that's a pretty badass storyline. Now, without completely redoing the graphics, I can't see PlayStation going out of their way to bring back games that are like over 2 console generations old without having some kind of new hook on the franchise. But as of November 2014, Sanzaru stated that there are no plans for a new Sly Cooper title, and considering how long it's been since we got that remark, it's very unlikely that Sony is trying to push this title at all. It kind of feels like it's being swept under the rug, so like no one's talking about it or thinking about it, and it's kind of looking like it's working for them thus far. I personally don't like the thought of that and don't think that's necessary. I just want a freaking way to play all these games so it's not locked into like a PS2 or 3. But right now, Sony isn't giving me one. So whether they remake it or not, like at the very least, spread the wealth so we can enjoy the franchise on PC or other platforms. As I said, the story was fantastic. Level design was fine, especially for the sequels. The controls were great. It's a ton of fun. It didn't go on too long. It was just a true blast of enjoyment at your fingertips. And they pretty much went on a remake spree already from the new Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, and even having Sly Cooper and Bentley appearing in the new PlayStation Move Heroes and Battle Royale. I'm just begging. I would love to see something done with this title sooner rather than later. For number 3, we're looking at the good old Donkey Kong 64.
Here we go.
Now this is something I would really love to see remastered or just completely redone. This was obviously an absolute classic, and introducing the whole squad of up to 5 playable Kongs, this gave such a different gameplay feel character to character, as they all had different special abilities and unique animations. The controls were on point for the time, nothing that really broke your experience other than the fact that you were playing on a controller that was like built for a freaking fighter pilot. But bringing games like this over to any other platform or even remastered for today's graphics would be just incredible. Am I the only one that wants to see games like this return? Like, the feeling of losing just absolute banging games as time moves on is something I just can't come to grips with. The multiplayer arcade style was another great aspect to the game, going up against your buddies. It wasn't balanced by any means, so that's something that could be tweaked a little bit. But if I was in charge of a remake, I'd rebuild it straight from the ground up. The game certainly didn't need to be any longer than what it was, but just change up the level design, add some more storyline, revamp the puzzles, just really look to redo like the whole thing. It has an extremely solid base to work off of. Obviously it's Donkey Kong, but let's be real, it's probably not going to happen. It's a classic, they know it. Having it on different platforms is even like wilder to think about. But hypothetically though, I think it would be a great contender for being a remake. Sitting at number 2 is Transformers War of Cybertron. And before it was taken over by the hive mind that is Activision, the developers, High Moon Studios, actually had some really cool games. 2 of the best were the War of Cybertron and the Fall of Cybertron. And these games were based on the Transformers IP that were very good and fun to play. And honestly, if you think about Transformers, it's like they were built to become video games. You're a freaking vehicle and a dude at the same time. You can mix up the gameplay by instantly driving or flying and then head right into on-foot combat. And that alone opens up a whole world of imagination when it comes to level design. For the first game, War of Cybertron, we were looking at 2 completely separate co-op campaigns, and isn't that crazy by itself? Co-op campaigns. Wild, right? You could play as the Decepticons or the Autobots, while the second game had more of a streamlined traditional campaign as you bounce back and forth between both factions. The second game was definitely better with the tighter combat and gunplay, and with the story having much better set pieces, but the first one didn't feel as rushed at the end. So maybe just bring both the games back as like a collection edition or something. The multiplayer modes were decent. Again, not the most balanced thing ever, but it was fun as all hell. It just feels like an arcade shooter that deserves a second shot at life. They're really not all that complex, but who cares? They fit what they're going for and they do it right. At number 1, we got the X-Men, the official game. Yeah, they named it the official game. That's never going to be a great title. But anyways, this is one of the only games where you are actually allowed to play as not only Wolverine himself, but plenty of the other X-Men. Now, I'm not going to lie, this one for sure would need some serious work. But like, we don't have many great X-Men games that are up to date and using the tech that we have at our disposal at this point. But this would have to be pretty much redone from the ground up. The sound design was pretty piss poor, even with just using the claws from Wolverine. It sounded like a hollow sound, or you're just smacking them with like wet noodles. The combat and level design, it was decent. You had Wolverine, which of course was all combat focused, but what's really cool is the game would like swap over to this traversal and shooting game as you play as Iceman. Then it'll swap over again and you get a platforming game when you get to play as Nightcrawler. Speaking of Nightcrawler, I'd be satisfied with just a whole game based around him. Add some stealth with his teleportation, a nice combat skill tree, and we're putting together a decent game here, folks. This game was very much based on the movies, which wasn't a bad thing. This is like one of the last remaining titles that haven't seen any love from remakes. X-Men, for some reason, just isn't making the cut. And you get a bunch of X-Men games that were made back in the day. So if we wanted to go nuts, just go ahead and package all these together too as a remastered pack or something like that. But make it an open world, dive into the characters a bit more, or just make new games altogether with focuses on each specific X-Men. Imagine a Storm game or a Beast game. That would be pretty cool, huh? They only need to be slightly more in depth in like every single way possible. But that's all for today. Leave your questions and comments down below. If you liked the video, consider hitting that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, all that jazz. And as always, I'll see you in the next one right here on C Fresh Gaming. Toodles!